The crimson dawn over New Chicago cast long shadows between the twisted metal spires that had once been humanity's greatest achievement, now serving as monuments to their subjugation under the Corvani Empire's iron grip. Marcus Blackwood pressed his back against the cold concrete wall of what remained of the old subway system, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid morning air as he watched the alien patrol drones sweep methodically through the ruins above, their blue scanning beams cutting through the debris like luminous knives searching for any sign of human resistance. 3 years had passed since the Corvani fleet had descended from the stars with promises of peace and prosperity, only to reveal their true intentions once humanity had welcomed them with open arms, the systematic enslavement of every man, woman, and child on Earth, forcing them to work in the massive mining operations that now scarred the planet's surface like infected wounds. The aliens had been methodical in their conquest, first studying human psychology and social structures for months, identifying key leaders and infrastructure, then striking with surgical precision to decapitate governments and military forces before anyone could mount an effective defense. Marcus remembered the day his younger brother David had been taken during one of the early recruitment drives, supposedly selected for his engineering skills to help rebuild the damaged cities, but like thousands of others, David had simply vanished into the sprawling labor camps that dotted the continent, their locations hidden behind energy shields that made rescue attempts impossible. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the tunnel, causing Marcus to tighten his grip on the modified plasma rifle he'd salvaged from a destroyed Corvani transport, its power cell jury-rigged with human technology that Dr. Elena Rodriguez had developed in their hidden underground facility. Elena emerged from the shadows with her usual quiet confidence, her dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail, her laboratory coat replaced by the tactical gear that had become standard uniform for the growing resistance movement she helped coordinate with her brilliant mind and unwavering determination to free humanity from its chains. "The sensor readings are off the charts," she whispered urgently, pulling out a small device that hummed with barely contained energy, its display showing patterns of electromagnetic interference that could only mean one thing: the Corvani were planning something massive, something that would require enormous power sources concentrated in a single location. Behind Elena came Jake Thompson, the former Marine whose military experience had proven invaluable in training civilians to fight against their technologically superior oppressors, his weathered face bearing fresh scars from their last raid on a supply convoy, but his eyes still burning with the fierce determination that had kept the resistance alive through its darkest hours. "We've got confirmation from the eastern cells," Jake reported in his characteristic low growl. "The bastards are moving heavy equipment toward the old industrial district. Looks like they're setting up some kind of massive extraction operation, bigger than anything we've seen before." Marcus felt his blood run cold as he processed this information, knowing that the Corvani's previous mining operations had been devastating enough, stripping away entire mountain ranges and leaving behind toxic wastelands where nothing could grow, but this new project seemed to dwarf all their previous efforts in scope and ambition. The resistance had been growing steadily, fueled by desperate humans who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for, but they were still vastly outnumbered and outgunned by an enemy that possessed technology centuries ahead of anything humanity had ever developed. Dr. Rodriguez had made remarkable progress reverse engineering captured Corvani equipment, creating weapons and defensive systems that could at least damage their opponents, but every victory came at a terrible cost in human lives, and Marcus wondered sometimes if they were simply delaying the inevitable extinction of their species. The tunnel suddenly vibrated with a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from the very earth itself, causing loose debris to rain down from the ceiling as all three resistance fighters looked up in alarm, realizing that whatever the Corvani were planning had just begun in earnest. "We need to get back to base immediately," Elena said with barely controlled urgency. "If my calculations are correct, they're not just mining for resources anymore, they're preparing to crack open the planet's core, and we have maybe 72 hours before they succeed in turning Earth into a lifeless husk." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a physical burden, knowing that the fate of humanity might rest in the hands of a few thousand desperate rebels hiding in sewers and abandoned buildings, armed with improvised weapons and sustained only by their refusal to surrender to an enemy that viewed them as nothing more than useful animals. The blue scanning beams above grew brighter and more frequent, suggesting that the Corvani were increasing security around their new operation, which meant that any assault on their position would be a suicide mission requiring perfect timing and coordination between resistance cells scattered across the continent. As they began moving deeper into the tunnel system toward their hidden base, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change, that the next few days would determine whether humanity would rise from the ashes of defeat to reclaim their world, or whether they would become just another extinct species catalogued in the Corvani Empire's vast database of conquered civilizations, their rebellion nothing more than a footnote in the aliens' clinical records of planetary acquisition and resource exploitation. The hidden resistance base sprawled through a network of interconnected subway tunnels and abandoned utility corridors beneath the ruins of downtown, its improvised laboratories and command centers carved from maintenance rooms and storage areas that the Corvani had overlooked during their initial occupation, believing that humans would never be resourceful enough to create an effective fighting force from such primitive conditions. Marcus led Elena and Jake through the main entrance, a concealed doorway behind a collapsed escalator that required a specific sequence of electromagnetic pulses to unlock, revealing the bustling hub of activity that had become humanity's last hope for survival against their alien oppressors. The central command room buzzed with desperate energy as dozens of resistance fighters hunched over salvaged computers and communication equipment, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of monitors displaying tactical maps, supply routes, and intelligence reports from cells across the continent. Commander Rebecca Stone looked up from a holographic display showing the city's underground infrastructure, her steel-gray hair pulled back in a military bun that emphasized the sharp angles of her face, hardened by 3 years of guerrilla warfare against an enemy that had already conquered 17 other worlds before setting their sights on Earth. "The seismic readings are getting worse by the hour," Rebecca announced grimly, gesturing toward a three-dimensional model of the planet that rotated slowly above the central table, its surface marked with angry red zones indicating areas of intense Corvani drilling activity. Dr. Rodriguez immediately moved to her workstation, connecting her scanner to the main computer system and uploading the electromagnetic readings she had collected during their reconnaissance mission, the data streams flowing across multiple screens in cascading patterns that revealed the true scope of the alien operation. "They're not just drilling for minerals," Elena said with growing horror as she analyzed the energy signatures, "they're installing some kind of resonance amplifiers deep in the mantle, devices that will synchronize with similar installations on other continents to create a harmonic frequency that will literally shake the planet apart from the inside." The resistance fighters gathered around the display fell silent as the implications of this discovery sank in, realizing that they were facing not just enslavement or death, but the complete annihilation of their world and everything they had ever known or loved. Captain Ryan Foster, Elena's research partner and former NASA engineer, pulled up geological surveys from before the invasion, overlaying them with current Corvani activity patterns to reveal a horrifying mathematical precision in the aliens' placement of their drilling sites, each one calculated to maximize the destructive potential of their planet-cracking technology. According to these calculations, Ryan said with barely controlled panic in his voice, once they activate the full resonance network, the resulting seismic activity will tear apart the continental plates within hours, reducing Earth to an asteroid field that they can harvest with their standard mining equipment. Marcus felt his hands clenching into fists as he stared at the damning evidence, knowing that his brother David and thousands of other enslaved humans were probably being forced to help construct the very devices that would destroy their home, their lives made even more tragic by the cruel irony of being forced to participate in their own annihilation. Jake Thompson stepped forward with the calculating expression of a career soldier analyzing an impossible battlefield, his scarred fingers tracing the locations of known Corvani installations while his tactical mind searched for any weakness they could exploit in what appeared to be a flawlessly executed plan of planetary destruction. "We have assets in 12 major cities," Jake reported, "but coordinating a simultaneous strike across the distance with our current communication limitations would be next to impossible, especially with the kind of security they'll have around these critical installations." The command room erupted in heated discussion as team leaders from different cells debated attack strategies, resource allocation, and the grim mathematics of a mission that would require them to divide their already limited forces across multiple targets while facing overwhelming odds at each location. Lieutenant Amy Chen stepped out of the communications booth, her face pale with the weight of terrible news from the eastern seaboard, where resistance cells had been reporting increased Corvani patrols and the mysterious disappearance of several key leaders who had been planning coordinated strikes against alien supply lines. "We've lost contact with Boston, Philadelphia, and Washington," Amy reported with forced composure. "Last transmission indicated they were under heavy assault by some kind of new Corvani shock troops, described as larger and more aggressive than anything we've encountered before." Dr. Rodriguez pulled up her analysis of captured alien technology, comparing the energy signatures of standard Corvani equipment with the massive power readings they had detected during their morning reconnaissance, her scientific mind racing to understand how their enemies had managed to deploy such overwhelming force so quickly. "They must have been planning this for months," Elena concluded with growing dread, "using our own people to build the infrastructure while simultaneously developing new military assets to crush any resistance that might threaten their timeline." The lights in the command center suddenly flickered as another deep tremor shook the tunnels, this one strong enough to crack several of the older concrete walls and send a shower of dust cascading from the ceiling, a stark reminder that time was running out for humanity and their desperate rebellion against forces beyond their comprehension. The emergency klaxons that Rebecca had installed throughout the base began wailing as another massive tremor rocked the underground facility, this one powerful enough to knock several fighters off their feet and cause a section of the eastern tunnel to partially collapse, trapping 3 scouts who had just returned from a reconnaissance mission to the industrial district where the Corvani were concentrating their most devastating equipment. Marcus grabbed a plasma cutter from the equipment rack and rushed toward the cave-in with Jake and several other volunteers, their boots splashing through puddles of contaminated groundwater that had begun seeping through cracks in the tunnel walls, while behind them Dr. Rodriguez frantically worked to stabilize her computer systems before they lost all the critical data she had spent months collecting about alien technology and operational patterns. The trapped scouts, led by Sergeant Lisa Martinez, called out from behind the rubble barrier that they had discovered something unprecedented during their mission, a massive Corvani installation protected by energy shields unlike anything the Resistance had previously encountered, but more importantly, they had witnessed human workers inside the facility who appeared to be moving freely rather than under direct alien supervision. They weren't in restraints, Lisa's muffled voice carried through the debris as Marcus and his team worked desperately to clear a path, and some of them were carrying what looked like modified Corvani weapons, like they were working as collaborators or maybe even guards. This revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled Resistance fighters, as the possibility of human collaboration with their alien oppressors represented a betrayal beyond anything they had imagined, threatening to undermine the unity and trust that had held their movement together through 3 years of brutal warfare. Elena looked up from her damaged equipment with an expression of sudden understanding, her brilliant mind making connections that others had missed in the chaos of the moment, realizing that the collaboration might not be betrayal at all but rather an infiltration opportunity that could provide them with unprecedented access to Corvani installations. "What if they're not collaborators?" she said with growing excitement. "What if they're prisoners who have been selected for specialized work because of their technical skills, given limited freedom of movement within the facility but still loyal to humanity?" Commander Stone immediately grasped the implications of this possibility, recognizing that if Elena was correct, they might have allies already positioned inside the most heavily defended alien installations, people who could provide intelligence, sabotage critical systems, or even assist in coordinated attacks from within enemy territory. The rescue team finally broke through the rubble barrier, pulling the 3 scouts to safety just as another tremor shook the base, this one accompanied by a low-frequency harmonic that seemed to resonate in their bones, confirming Elena's worst fears about the resonance amplifiers and the accelerating timeline of the Corvani planet-cracking operation. Sergeant Martinez, despite her injuries from the tunnel collapse, immediately reported to the command center with detailed intelligence about the installation's layout, security protocols, and most importantly, the identity of several human workers she had recognized as missing Resistance members who had been presumed dead after failed raids over the past year. "Thomas Bradley is definitely alive," Lisa reported with barely contained emotion, "and he was carrying some kind of modified plasma rifle that looked like it had been enhanced with Corvani technology, which means either they've broken him completely or he's been playing the longest infiltration game in history." Marcus felt his heart racing as he heard Thomas's name, remembering the brilliant young engineer who had disappeared during a supply raid 8 months earlier, and whose loss had been a devastating blow to their technical capabilities and morale. Dr. Rodriguez immediately began calculating the possibilities, her scientific mind analyzing the potential for using these embedded assets to gather intelligence about the resonance amplifier network, while simultaneously developing plans for extracting or communicating with them before the Corvani completed their devastating project. Captain Foster pulled up architectural plans of similar Corvani installations from other conquered worlds, cross-referencing them with Lisa's observations to create a detailed model of the facility's internal structure, identifying potential entry points, security vulnerabilities, and the most likely locations for critical systems that could be sabotaged to disrupt the planet-cracking operation. If we can get a message to Thomas and the others, Ryan suggested with growing confidence, they might be able to disable the resonance amplifiers from the inside while we launch coordinated strikes against the external defenses and power systems. The command center erupted with renewed energy as resistance fighters began developing what might be their last and most desperate plan, knowing that success would require perfect timing, unprecedented coordination between internal and external forces, and a level of sacrifice that would test the limits of human courage and determination. Jake Thompson studied the facility schematics with the calculating gaze of a tactician who had learned to find hope in impossible situations, recognizing that while the mission would be suicidal under normal circumstances, the presence of Allied forces inside the installation changed the fundamental dynamics of the assault. "We'll need to hit them fast and hard," Jake concluded grimly, drawing their attention away from the internal sabotage while our people inside work to bring down the resonance network, and we'll only get one chance because they'll adapt their security protocols immediately after the first attack. As the resistance fighters began preparing for what might be humanity's final stand against extinction, Marcus couldn't help but think about his brother David and wonder if he too might be among the human workers inside Corvani installations, forced to choose between collaboration and death, but possibly waiting for exactly this moment to strike back against their oppressors. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation as resistance cells across the continent received coded transmissions outlining the most audacious plan ever attempted by the human underground, a coordinated assault that would require split-second timing between internal saboteurs and external strike teams attacking installations separated by thousands of miles, while the planet itself continued to shake with increasing violence as the Corvani pushed their resonance amplifiers toward full activation. Dr. Rodriguez worked without sleep in her makeshift laboratory, surrounded by dismantled alien technology and jury-rigged human equipment, desperately trying to develop a communication method that could penetrate the electromagnetic barriers surrounding the heavily shielded facilities where their embedded allies waited for word that the rebellion was finally ready to strike back with everything they had. The breakthrough came when Elena discovered that the Corvani communication systems used a specific frequency that could be mimicked using modified components from their own captured equipment, allowing her to create burst transmissions that would appear to be routine facility communications while actually carrying coded messages to any resistance members working inside the installations. Captain Foster assisted with the technical implementation, his NASA engineering background proving invaluable in calculating the precise signal modulation needed to avoid detection by the sophisticated monitoring systems that the aliens used to maintain control over their human workforce, while simultaneously ensuring that the messages would be recognizable to anyone familiar with pre-war resistance protocols. The first successful contact came from the Chicago installation, where Thomas Bradley confirmed his status as a willing infiltrator who had been gathering intelligence and recruiting other supposedly collaborative workers for months, building a network of saboteurs who had been waiting for exactly this opportunity to strike against their captors from within their most secure facilities. Thomas reports they have access to the primary control systems, Amy Chen announced from her communication station, her voice tight with excitement and fear as she decoded the incoming burst transmission, but the resonance amplifiers are protected by multiple redundant safeguards that will require simultaneous action at all 7 continental installations to prevent automatic failsafes from engaging. Commander Stone studied the tactical display showing the locations of all known major installations, her experienced military mind calculating the logistics of coordinating such a massive operation with their limited resources and communication capabilities, knowing that even a single failure could doom the entire mission and condemn humanity to extinction. Marcus volunteered to lead the assault team targeting the primary installation in what had once been Detroit, where intelligence suggested the Corvani had positioned their master control systems for the entire planet-cracking operation, making it both the most heavily defended and the most critical target for their desperate gambit. Jake Thompson would command the strike force attacking the western facility near Los Angeles, while other team leaders prepared to assault installations in Miami, Atlanta, Denver, Seattle, and the massive complex hidden beneath the ruins of what had been New York City before the Corvani bombardment. The resistance fighters spent precious hours reviewing every scrap of intelligence about their targets, memorizing facility layouts, guard rotations, and security protocols while Dr. Rodriguez distributed the modified weapons and equipment she had developed using reverse-engineered alien technology, each piece representing months of dangerous scavenging missions and careful experimentation under impossible conditions. Elena revealed that her analysis of the resonance amplifier network had identified a critical vulnerability in the system's design, a brief window during the final activation sequence when all 7 installations would be synchronized but not yet fully operational, creating a 30-second opportunity when coordinated sabotage could cascade through the entire network and permanently disable the planet-cracking apparatus. The timing has to be perfect, Elena warned the assembled team leaders, her usually calm voice betraying the enormous pressure she felt as the architect of humanity's last hope. If we're even 10 seconds off, their failsafes will engage and we'll never get another chance. The underground base became a hive of desperate activity as fighters packed equipment, checked weapons, and said what might be final goodbyes to friends and family members who would remain behind to coordinate communications and maintain the resistance network if the mission failed catastrophically. Marcus found himself thinking constantly about David, wondering if his brother might be among the infiltrators working inside one of the target installations, and whether they might actually see each other again during the chaos of the upcoming assault, or if David had already been broken by years of forced labor and alien manipulation. Captain Foster pulled Marcus aside with disturbing news from the eastern monitoring stations, where seismic sensors had detected a significant acceleration in the Corvani timeline, suggesting that the planet-cracking operation might commence within hours rather than the days they had originally calculated for their preparations. "We have to move tonight," Ryan said with barely controlled urgency. "The resonance patterns are building toward critical mass faster than Elena predicted, which means they've probably made some kind of breakthrough that's allowing them to compress their activation schedule." The klaxon sounded again throughout the base as another massive tremor shook the tunnels, this one accompanied by a sound like distant thunder that seemed to come from the Earth's core itself, confirming that humanity had run out of time for careful planning and would have to gamble everything on a mission that was already desperately dangerous even under optimal conditions. The strike teams moved through the abandoned subway tunnels like ghosts in the darkness, their modified equipment muffled by sound-dampening materials that Dr. Rodriguez had developed from salvaged alien stealth technology, while overhead the city trembled with seismic activity so intense that several skyscrapers had begun collapsing spontaneously, their twisted remains adding to the apocalyptic landscape that Earth had become under Corvani occupation. Marcus led his 15-member assault team through service corridors toward the Detroit installation, their plasma rifles charged with power cells that Elena had enhanced using principles reverse-engineered from captured alien weapons, each cell representing months of dangerous raids and careful experimentation that had cost the lives of brave volunteers who died to give humanity this final chance at survival. The communication system crackled with status reports from other teams as they moved into position around their respective targets, Jake Thompson's voice coming through clearly from the western approach to the Los Angeles facility, where his scouts had confirmed the presence of at least 3 known resistance members among the supposedly collaborative human workforce. Echo team in position, Jake's voice carried the controlled tension of a career soldier preparing for what might be his final mission, visual confirmation on the target facility, energy readings off the charts, looks like they're already beginning preliminary activation sequences. Elena's modified communication device picked up burst transmissions from Thomas Bradley and other embedded infiltrators across the continental network, their coded messages confirming that the Corvani were indeed accelerating their timeline, with master control systems being brought online hours ahead of the original schedule that the Resistance had calculated for their desperate gambit. The Detroit installation loomed before Marcus's team like a metallic cancer growing from the Earth itself, its alien architecture twisting skyward in impossible geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, while energy barriers shimmered around its perimeter like heat mirages, protecting the facility with defensive systems more advanced than anything humanity had ever developed even before the invasion. Captain Foster monitored the seismic readings from his portable scanner, watching in horror as the deep harmonic frequencies increased in intensity with each passing minute, the resonance amplifiers buried beneath the installation already beginning to synchronize with similar devices across the continent in preparation for the final planet-cracking sequence. Energy output is climbing exponentially, Ryan reported through their secure channel, his engineers' training helping him interpret the alien technology's operational patterns. If Elena's calculations are correct, we have maybe 2 hours before they reach critical resonance, after which point stopping them becomes physically impossible. The first phase of the mission required Marcus's team to disable the external defensive perimeter while simultaneously creating enough chaos to draw attention away from the subtle sabotage that Thomas and his infiltrators would be conducting inside the facility's most sensitive areas, a balancing act that demanded perfect timing and coordination between forces that hadn't been able to train together. Sergeant Martinez, despite her recent injuries from the tunnel collapse, had insisted on joining the assault team as their demolitions expert, her knowledge of alien explosive compounds proving invaluable in developing the specialized charges needed to breach the energy barriers that protected the installation's critical infrastructure. The communication device suddenly erupted with urgent transmissions from resistance cells across the continent, reporting that Corvani forces were mobilizing in unprecedented numbers, as if their alien commanders had somehow detected the coordinated threat developing against their planet-cracking operation, sending massive reinforcements toward every major installation simultaneously. "They know something's coming," Amy Chen's voice crackled through from the base command center. "Satellite reconnaissance shows Corvani shock troops moving toward all target locations, plus some kind of new aerial units we've never seen before, like flying fortresses armed with weapons that are making our sensors go crazy." Marcus felt his blood run cold as he realized that their desperate mission might have been compromised from the very beginning, that perhaps the Corvani had been monitoring their communications despite Elena's sophisticated encryption protocols, or worse, that some of the supposedly infiltrated humans might actually be genuine collaborators feeding intelligence to their alien masters. The possibility of betrayal within their own ranks created a new layer of uncertainty that threatened to undermine the entire operation, but with the planet-cracking sequence already underway, retreat was no longer an option even if they were walking into an elaborate trap designed to eliminate the resistance once and for all. Dr. Rodriguez's voice came through the communication network with a mixture of determination and desperation, announcing that she had discovered additional technical specifications for the resonance amplifier network that revealed an even more horrifying truth about the Corvani's ultimate intentions for Earth and its human population. "The resonance frequency isn't just designed to crack the planet," Elena reported with barely controlled panic. "It's calibrated to a specific harmonic that will preserve certain mineral deposits while pulverizing everything else, including any organic matter within the planet's gravitational field, which means they're planning to exterminate every living thing on Earth before they even begin mining operations." This revelation transformed their mission from a desperate attempt to prevent enslavement into humanity's final stand against complete extinction, raising the stakes beyond anything they had previously imagined while simultaneously confirming that failure would mean not just the end of human civilization, but the obliteration of every plant, animal, and microorganism that had ever called Earth home. Marcus checked his weapon one final time as his team prepared for the assault that would determine whether humanity would find a way to survive against impossible odds, or whether they would become just another extinct species catalogued in the Corvani Empire's vast database of conquered worlds, their rebellion remembered only in the clinical records of an alien civilization that viewed genocide as merely another tool for efficient resource extraction. The assault began at exactly 2,347 hours with synchronized plasma charges detonating around the perimeter of all 7 installations simultaneously, the coordinated explosions creating massive electromagnetic pulses that temporarily disrupted the Corvani defensive grids while Marcus led his team through the breach in the Detroit facility's outer barriers, their modified weapons cutting through alien security drones like lightning splitting the darkness of a violent storm. Inside the Los Angeles installation, Jake Thompson's forces encountered heavier resistance than expected, facing not just standard Corvani guards but also the mysterious new shock troops that Amy had spotted on satellite reconnaissance, hulking biomechanical hybrids that seemed to combine alien technology with corrupted human neural tissue, their movements unnaturally fast and their weapons firing energy beams that could slice through reinforced concrete like paper. Thomas Bradley's voice crackled through the communication network from deep within the Chicago facility, reporting that he and his infiltrator team had successfully accessed the primary control systems, but they had discovered that the resonance amplifiers were protected by fail-safe mechanisms that required biometric authorization from high-ranking Corvani commanders, creating an unexpected obstacle that threatened to derail the entire sabotage operation. Marcus fought his way through corridors filled with defending aliens and their mechanical sentries, his plasma rifle overheating from continuous use while Sergeant Martinez worked frantically to plant demolition charges at critical junction points that Elena had identified as vulnerable nodes in the installation's power distribution network, the acrid smell of burned alien metal filling the air as human determination clashed with technological superiority in desperate close-quarters combat. The communication device suddenly erupted with an impossible transmission that made Marcus's heart skip a beat, David's voice, weak but unmistakably alive, calling out from somewhere deep within the Detroit installation where he had apparently been working as a forced laborer on the very resonance amplifier systems that threatened to destroy their world. Marcus, if you can hear this, I'm in sublevel 7 near the primary resonance chamber, David's voice carried through the static and interference. They've got dozens of humans down here working on the final calibrations, but most of us have been planning our own rebellion, waiting for a chance like this to strike back. The revelation that his brother was not only alive but positioned near the most critical systems filled Marcus with a surge of desperate energy that drove him forward through increasingly fierce resistance, while behind him other team members fell to alien weapons that carved through their improvised armor with terrifying efficiency, their sacrifice buying precious time for the mission to continue. Captain Foster's technical analysis revealed that the resonance amplifiers were already approaching 80% of their operational capacity, with harmonic frequencies building toward the critical threshold that would trigger the planet-cracking sequence, giving the Resistance less than 30 minutes to complete their sabotage before Earth's destruction became an unstoppable physical process. Dr. Rodriguez monitored the technical data streams from her position at the base command center, her brilliant mind racing to identify alternative solutions as reports flooded in from the other installations, where resistance teams were encountering similar obstacles and casualties that threatened to overwhelm their limited numbers before they could complete their objectives. The Miami team reported complete communications blackout after encountering what appeared to be a massive trap, while the Seattle assault had been repelled entirely by defensive systems unlike anything the Resistance had previously encountered, leaving only 5 of the 7 installations still under active assault by increasingly desperate human forces. Thomas Bradley's infiltrator team made a crucial breakthrough when they discovered that several Corvani commanders had been killed during the initial plasma charge explosions, their biometric authorization codes still accessible through neural interfaces that could be activated by human technicians who understood the alien control systems, opening a narrow window of opportunity for the sabotage to proceed. "I've got access to the primary resonance controls," Thomas reported with barely controlled excitement, "but the system requires simultaneous input from all remaining installations, which means we need to coordinate our actions perfectly or the fail-safes will lock us out permanently." Marcus reached sublevel 7 to find a scene that combined the horrors of alien technology with the resilience of human spirit, dozens of enslaved workers who had spent months learning the intricacies of Corvani systems while secretly planning their own uprising, including David, whose eyes blazed with the same determination that had sustained the Resistance through 3 years of occupation. The brothers embraced briefly before turning their attention to the massive resonance amplifier that dominated the chamber, its crystalline structure pulsing with energy patterns that made the air itself vibrate with barely contained power, while around them other human workers grabbed improvised weapons and prepared to defend the sabotage team against the Corvani forces that would inevitably attempt to stop them. Elena's voice came through the communication network with updated calculations that revealed a terrifying acceleration in the resonance buildup, as the remaining functional installations had automatically compensated for the facilities that had been damaged, redistributing the harmonic load in ways that actually increased the overall destructive potential of the network. The resonance cascade is approaching critical mass faster than we calculated, Elena reported with growing alarm. You have maybe 15 minutes before the harmonic frequency reaches the point where planetary destruction becomes inevitable, regardless of what we do to the individual amplifiers. As Marcus and David worked together to access the resonance amplifier's control systems, fighting side by side for the first time since the invasion began, the fate of humanity hung in the balance while alien reinforcements poured into the installation, determined to prevent the humans from disrupting a process that would add Earth's resources to the vast Corvani Empire while simultaneously eliminating any possibility of future resistance from the troublesome species that had dared to fight back against their technological superiors. The sublevel 7 chamber erupted into chaos as Corvani shock troops burst through the emergency access hatches, their biomechanical forms moving with inhuman speed as they fired energy weapons that turned human defenders into ash within seconds, while Marcus and David worked desperately at the resonance amplifier's control interface, their fingers flying over alien symbols that Thomas Bradley had taught them during frantic radio transmissions from the Chicago installation where similar battles raged between human saboteurs and increasingly desperate alien forces. Elena's voice crackled through the communication network with critical timing updates as the harmonic frequency approached 95% of critical mass, her calculations showing that they had less than 8 minutes to execute a perfectly synchronized shutdown sequence across all remaining functional installations, or the resonance cascade would become an unstoppable force that would tear Earth apart from its molten core outward. Jake Thompson's team in Los Angeles had fought their way to their own resonance chamber, but at a terrible cost. Half his fighters lay dead or dying around the massive crystalline amplifier, while Jake himself nursed a plasma burn that had seared through his left shoulder, leaving him barely able to operate the alien control systems that Thomas was coaching them through via increasingly sporadic radio contact. The Denver installation had fallen completely silent after reporting success in reaching their target chamber, while Atlanta continued to transmit desperate pleas for assistance as their small team found themselves overwhelmed by defensive systems that seemed to anticipate their every move, suggesting that the Corvani had learned to adapt their security protocols in real time based on the resistance tactics being employed at other facilities. Sergeant Martinez fell beside Marcus as a Corvani energy beam caught her in the chest, but with her final breath she managed to activate the demolition charges she had placed throughout the facility's power distribution network, creating cascading failures that temporarily disrupted the installation's defensive systems and gave the human saboteurs precious seconds to continue their work. David's engineering knowledge, honed by months of forced labor on the very systems they were now trying to destroy, proved invaluable as he identified the specific control sequences needed to initiate an emergency shutdown that would cascade through the resonance network, but only if all remaining installations executed the same sequence within a 30-second window that was rapidly approaching. 5 installations still responding, Amy Chen reported from the base command center, her voice tight with tension as she coordinated the final phase of humanity's desperate gambit. Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles, New York, and Atlanta are all in position, but we're detecting massive Corvani reinforcements converging on every location. They're throwing everything they have at stopping us. Thomas Bradley's team in Chicago had managed to fight their way to the Master Control Center, where they discovered that the resonance amplifier network included a manual override system designed to prevent exactly the kind of sabotage they were attempting. But the override required simultaneous input from human neural patterns that the Corvani had been studying and cataloging throughout their 3-year occupation of Earth. The horrifying realization dawned on the resistance fighters that their alien oppressors had been preparing for this possibility all along, using their enslaved human workforce not just for labor but as unwilling participants in creating security systems specifically designed to prevent human rebellion, turning their own people into living keys that could lock them out of their final chance for survival. Captain Foster's analysis of the neural interface requirements revealed that the Corvani system demanded biometric input from humans who had been exposed to specific alien technologies for extended periods, which meant that only the long-term prisoners like David and Thomas possessed the neural modifications necessary to access the override controls that could shut down the resonance network. Marcus felt a surge of desperate hope as he realized that his brother's months of forced labor had inadvertently prepared him for this exact moment, while similar revelations occurred at other installations where enslaved humans discovered that their suffering had given them the very capabilities needed to strike back at their tormentors in ways the aliens had never anticipated. The communication network erupted with coordinated countdown signals as teams at all 5 remaining installations prepared for simultaneous activation of the shutdown sequence, their human operators placing their hands on neural interface panels while their defenders fought desperately to hold off the waves of Corvani forces that had realized the true threat to their planet-cracking operation. 30 seconds to synchronization, Elena announced as her calculations reached their final phase. All teams must execute on my mark or the cascade effect will fail and the resonance will achieve critical mass regardless of individual installation status. The countdown began as Marcus watched his brother prepare to interface directly with alien technology that could kill him instantly if the neural patterns didn't match the system's requirements, while around them the last defenders of humanity's future fell one by one to overwhelming alien firepower that filled the chamber with the acrid smell of burned metal and vaporized human flesh. Thomas Bradley's voice came through clearly from Chicago as he reported successful neural interface contact, followed immediately by Jake Thompson from Los Angeles confirming that his team had achieved the same breakthrough, while the New York installation transmitted their readiness signal just as massive explosions rocked their facility from Corvani assault forces attempting to breach their final defensive positions. 10 seconds, Elena called out as the harmonic frequency reached 99% of critical mass, the resonance amplifiers throughout the installation beginning to vibrate with such intensity that the crystalline structures themselves started to crack under the enormous energies they were being forced to contain and focus toward Earth's vulnerable core. David's hand touched the neural interface as Marcus provided covering fire against the final wave of Corvani shock troops, the alien biomechanical hybrids advancing through the chamber with relentless determination while the fate of an entire world hung in the balance of a desperate sabotage attempt that represented humanity's last hope for survival against extinction. The neural interface blazed with alien energy as David's consciousness merged with the Corvani control systems, his human mind fighting through layers of technological complexity while his brother Marcus held the line against advancing shock troops whose biomechanical forms seemed immune to conventional weapons, their energy beams carving through the chamber's walls as Elena's countdown reached its final seconds and the fate of Earth hung suspended between salvation and annihilation. Neural link established, David called out through gritted teeth as alien technology flooded his brain with incomprehensible data streams, while similar confirmations echoed through the communication network from Thomas in Chicago, Jake in Los Angeles, and the brave volunteers at installations in New York and Atlanta who had sacrificed everything to reach this moment of perfect synchronization. The resonance amplifiers throughout all 5 facilities began screaming with harmonic frequencies that made the air itself seem to tear apart, crystalline structures fracturing under energies they were never designed to contain as the human operators initiated shutdown sequences that turned the aliens' own planet-cracking technology against itself in a cascade of controlled destruction. Marcus watched in amazement as his brother's eyes blazed with unnatural light, the neural interface creating a direct connection between human determination and alien technology that began overriding safety protocols and redirecting the massive energies away from Earth's core toward the amplifier networks themselves, causing the installations to consume their own power sources in spectacular displays of technological self-destruction. Explosions rocked every facility simultaneously as the shutdown cascade triggered catastrophic failures throughout the resonance network, the synchronized sabotage creating a chain reaction that not only disabled the planet-cracking operation but also generated massive electromagnetic pulses that crippled Corvani defensive systems and communication networks across the continent, leaving their forces blind and confused as their technological superiority suddenly evaporated. Jake Thompson's voice came through the communication system with barely controlled joy as he reported that the Los Angeles installation was collapsing in on itself, the alien architecture unable to withstand the forces it had been designed to focus and control, while Thomas Bradley confirmed similar results from Chicago where the massive crystalline amplifiers had shattered into harmless fragments that could never again threaten any world with destruction. The Corvani shock troops in the Detroit facility suddenly stopped their advance, their biomechanical systems failing as the electromagnetic cascade disrupted the alien technology that had been keeping their corrupted hybrid bodies functional, causing them to collapse in twitching heaps while their energy weapons powered down and became nothing more than expensive metal sculptures. David's neural connection to the alien systems revealed the full scope of their victory as data streams showed similar failures occurring at Corvani installations around the globe, their planet-wide occupation force suddenly cut off from command and control networks that had relied on the very resonance technology the humans had just destroyed, leaving scattered alien units isolated and vulnerable to coordinated resistance attacks. Elena's voice crackled through the communication network with readings that confirmed their impossible success, as seismic sensors showed the deep harmonic frequencies finally dissipating, the threat to Earth's core eliminated permanently by the cascade effect that had turned the Corvani's own advanced technology into the instrument of their defeat on a world they had expected to strip mine without significant resistance. The immediate aftermath of the sabotage revealed the true extent of humanity's triumph as reports flooded in from resistance cells across the continent, describing Corvani forces retreating in confusion toward their remaining starships while human slaves emerged from labor camps and processing facilities, their alien overseers no longer able to maintain control without the technological infrastructure that had made their occupation possible. Captain Foster's analysis of the electromagnetic damage showed that the Corvani fleet itself had been severely compromised by the cascade effect, their ships' navigation and communication systems disrupted by energies that their own amplifier network had been designed to generate, leaving them stranded in Earth's orbit without the ability to coordinate an effective evacuation or counterattack against the newly liberated human population. Marcus helped his exhausted brother away from the still-sparking neural interface, both of them bearing the scars of a battle that had cost thousands of human lives but ultimately preserved billions more, while around them other survivors began the process of securing the facility and treating the wounded who had given everything to ensure that humanity would have a future on their home world. The communication network buzzed with status reports from across the resistance movement as Rebecca Stone coordinated the transition from desperate rebellion to organized liberation, her military experience proving invaluable in managing the complex logistics of accepting Corvani surrenders, securing alien technology for human use, and beginning the enormous task of rebuilding a civilization that had been brought to the brink of extinction. Thomas Bradley's team in Chicago reported discovering extensive databases containing information about other worlds the Corvani had conquered, including detailed records of successful resistance movements that had managed to drive off the alien invaders, suggesting that humanity's victory was part of a larger pattern of species fighting back against the Empire's expansion across the galaxy. Dr. Rodriguez announced her intention to establish research facilities dedicated to understanding and adapting the captured alien technology for peaceful purposes, using the same scientific principles that had made their desperate sabotage possible to help humanity rebuild their world and eventually reach for the stars as equals rather than victims in a universe full of wonders and dangers. The months that followed saw humanity emerging from their underground hideouts and ruined cities to reclaim a world that had been scarred but not broken by 3 years of alien occupation, their victory serving as proof that courage and determination could overcome even the most overwhelming technological advantages when people fought together for their freedom and survival. Marcus and David worked side by side in the reconstruction efforts, their brotherhood strengthened by shared sacrifice and their commitment to ensuring that future generations would inherit a world where humanity controlled its own destiny, having learned that the universe might be vast and dangerous, but human spirit could overcome any challenge when people refused to surrender their hope for a better tomorrow.